TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE, where we offer the entertainment, sports, weather, traffic, news, and information that commercial drivers want to hear. Human trafficking is a huge problem that enslaves people all over the world, forcing them into things like prostitution and unspeakable, dangerous situations. The United States ranks number 1 in human trafficking and is rising on the border states. July 30th is World Day Against Human Trafficking in Persons. The 2021 theme is Victims' Voices Lead the Way, and this year's theme puts the victims of human trafficking at the center of the campaign led by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Today we have Laura Peters and Sheila Cook-Cohen from Zonta International, a global organization that empowers women worldwide and advocates against violence and human trafficking. The organization has worked with Truckers Against Trafficking, and Laura is president of International Software Systems and a volunteer with Zonta International. She's a tireless advocate to stop the oppression and mistreatment that's going on with things like human trafficking. Sheila is also a tireless advocate. She's the Zonta District 9 Advocacy Chair of the Zonta USA Caucus and a member of the U.S. Women's Caucus at the United Nations. Welcome, Laura and Sheila. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you from both of us, yes.
You know, I find it outrageous. Slavery is illegal, but slavery goes on in the 21st century in the form of human trafficking. It's a terrible human rights violation. Could you please educate our listeners on how big and terrible this problem really is?
Well, you want me to start, Laura?
In just a second, let me just point out a few things and then you can take it from there.
Okay.
Trafficking, like many nefarious activities, it is driven economically. And so victims of trafficking, they are considered like inventory, and they have to have those inventory turns to make their money, and that's all that they're interested in. So, of course, many times these victims are addicted to drugs. They make them addicted to drugs. They are beaten. They are coerced. They're branded. And they're nothing more than a slave, making money for the trafficker. Our organization, Zonta International, has been involved with our international projects actually since 2002 in Bosnia-Herzegovina, as well as recent as the 2016-2018 time period, Thailand. We've had a project there as well. And all of our clubs locally participate in local advocacy and service to bring awareness to trafficking and what we can do. There are things that we can do that we'll talk about today for the truckers that might be listening to us, as well as other organizations. There are tips to get the word out and be aware of what's going on, because it does exist in your community. That's a big myth that it doesn't, but it does.
Right on. Okay, so it sounds like my turn.
Yes.
I'll just give you an idea of the sense of how large this is. And these figures are coming from DHS. 199,000 young people, boys and girls, are trafficked in the U.S. annually. That's a massive amount of people. And so how do they get there? Or what's the mixture? How do you recognize it? And I think that would be most important to your audience. Well, at first, there are top 10 states regarding trafficking, and I bet some of you guys know them: Nevada, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Delaware, California, of course, is the biggest one, Missouri, Michigan, and Texas. Just let me give you a breakdown. There's 26% of these kids are white, 40% black, 63% Hispanic, which is growing as a result of the individuals who are trying to move into the U.S. 17% are Asian. And it's a girls and boys. Now, you heard me say boys, and very often most of us will think, oh, girls. No, it's boys also. The girls' ages run between 11 and 13, the boys between 10 and 14. And for the boys, it's labor and sex trafficking. So it's a massive, massive undertaking to address this issue locally and nationally as well. Department of Human, DHS has been very strong in a program called their Blue Light campaign, in which they do training. They are focusing on immigration, of course. And one of the newest issues that have arisen is Indigenous women. And that's been one that I've just started working on in the last month or so, at the problems that Indigenous women have. Truckers Against Trafficking, I can't say enough good things about them. They are super, super good people. And if you aren't aware, just a little plug for them, they have buses on the lookout. And that's the theory being that the school bus driver in the morning sees the kids morning and afternoon, and the visibility that comes along with that. So that's the picture. That's who it is. And if I was in your shoes driving a truck, and I did say this to my son-in-law, so what am I supposed to look for? Well, aside from them knocking on the door, which, of course, I'm sure does happen, they're usually malnourished, underweight. You might see injuries. Sometimes they're hidden, but the moment a young girl takes off her blouse, you can see it. They avoid eye contact. It's embarrassment, I would think. They have scripted asks. They don't say, hey, you want to have a good time? They go into more detail depending upon who they're speaking with. They carry no personal documentation to them, just in case they're caught. They're very timid and fearful, and I would be surprised that they wouldn't be feeling that way. However, some of them could be very strong. They've been doing it a long time. It is part of their life. They rely on their traffickers, and I think you had mentioned it already, Shelley, is that the traffickers are nasty people. They believe this is the gift that gives on giving, and that just is enough to make you sick.
Yes.
So, and stop me anytime, because I try to. Okay,
You're
good.
giving us a really good picture. People really need to know how terrible all of this is.
Oh, yeah, it is onerous for sure. So how does it start? And Laura, of course, will know this. There's a lot of segments of issues that we deal with within Zonta. One of them, for instance, is domestic violence. But how does it start? Domestic violence. Kid grows up or is in the house and the kid's getting beaten by dad, or the vice versa. So that's what they've learned. Domestic violence, I got to get out of here. I'm going to go get my car. I'm going to go move to an apartment. That's unfortunately one of the larger issues. Poverty. Okay. There are parents in this world, as much as we don't want to believe it, that will put their kids out there because they need the money. Okay. Whether they need it for drugs or they need it to pay rent, doesn't matter. Kidnapping, that happens a lot, and it's happening on the borders, particularly in California, Arizona, and Texas. And I know you've read it in the papers as well. Another issue is that the juvenile system is overloaded. There's not enough social workers, not enough people to work with and make change in the community and with the child. And the same with the foster parents. And we've all heard this, some foster parents are terrible and some of them are really good. But that's, it's an even-keeled situation. This one kind of surprised me as I was researching, and that is the prison guards. And I thought, no, wait a minute. They spend 8 hours, 10 hours a day with people who are in prison for trafficking or rape or any other violent type of crime. And it's got to be interesting stories to listen to, but I would think that what's happening is some of the prison guards are getting pulled into it. And actually, there are numbers to support that. I don't have those numbers. I didn't dig deep enough, but there's definitely numbers to support that. Another thought that's come
Sheila,
up.
if you don't mind me interrupting.
Sure.
The prison guards are being pulled into human trafficking activities? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
How does that work when people are behind bars? Are they...
Okay, well, John, who's in behind bars, and Ben, who is the prison guard. John is saying, hey, you can make a lot of money. I know you guys don't get paid a lot. I mean, they've got wonderful stories, right? But if you go see my friend Peter, he will teach you and let you understand how you can make more money. And I don't know exactly what they say, Shelley, but think about it. That's what I would think. I used to work for the U.S. government in criminal justice, and I have seen and heard everything, or so I thought. But that's how it is. They need money. A lot of it is about poverty.
And, I have also heard in many cases, some prison guards can be very predatory.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Even within the prison. And I worked in the federal system, which is a little bit less predatory than the states. Okay. But yeah, they certainly can. Wow. One other one, which may or may not surprise you, and this is a very large issue for our organization, for Zonta, and that is child marriage. And there's only 5 states in our country that say a young girl cannot get married or can get married at the age of 18 and over. But girls are still being married off at 14 or at 12 to 40-year-old men. So what's interesting about it is if they are married, and this is the law, if they are married, sex outside the marriage would not be a crime because it is not a crime already because they are married. Yet, how do you turn that around? It's like, wait a minute, this is a child. The marriage makes all the difference in the world. One more reason why to make, and I'm not trying to pitch the child marriage, but Laura and I see this all day long, or all month long for sure.
And Shelley, I wanted to add some other tips that Sheila had started to say, speaking directly to your audience, to the truckers, which I want to give a huge shout out and say thank you, because thanks to their diligence and them being aware through Truckers Against Trafficking, they literally have saved lives. And I have read in preparation for today, story after story of where they have saved girls and young women. So I want to send my admiration and a big thank you to all of them for what, not only do they keep our commerce going, but they also are protecting victims of human trafficking.
Yes.
Just a couple other ones.
Laura, we actually have to go to break right now. Okay. How about we come back with your tips when we come back from our break? Because I don't want to have to interrupt you, and I'm sure that there's some wonderful information here that we all need to know. We're talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook-Cohen from Zonta International about human trafficking and other terrible human rights violations. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more great information coming up.
This blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Common mental health issues truck drivers face. Every day the roads are full of heavy-duty trucks. Trucks are responsible for nearly 80% of America's freight. Being a truck driver is not an easy job, and it's not for everyone. Trucking can be hard on an individual, both physically and mentally. Suffering from mental health can put truck drivers in a dangerous situation. To safely operate a heavy-duty vehicle, drivers need to be physically and mentally healthy. Here are 4 common mental health issues that truck drivers face. Why mental health issues are common in truck drivers. Truck driving is a demanding job and can be very stressful at times. A stressful work environment leads to anxiety and depression. In addition to a stressful work environment, truck drivers spend a lot of time alone in their truck. Constantly being alone can affect one's mental health. Although many truck drivers suffer from mental health issues, some are afraid to get help because they fear losing their job. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's FMCSA, requires drivers to be in good health before receiving or renewing a commercial driver's license. The trucking industry is predominantly male. A study by RAHM states that men are less likely to get treatment for their mental health than women. It's important for drivers to take care of their mental health as much as their physical health. Common mental health issues in truck drivers. Depression. Depression is an illness that affects you mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's very common in the trucking industry. Being alone and away from friends and family contributes to depression. It's important to know the difference between feeling down and having depression. If you feel that you're experiencing depression, seek out help. Depression is serious and can affect your ability to operate your truck. Anxiety. Because of how stressful trucking can be, anxiety is very common for drivers. This is especially true for new drivers. Many experienced drivers have reported having anxiety and panic attacks while on the road. It's important to know the difference between new driver anxiety and generalized anxiety. If you're often experiencing anxiety while working, take the necessary steps to get help. Chronic sleep disturbances. A good night's rest is crucial to truck drivers. Not having enough sleep can make it dangerous to operate a heavy-duty vehicle. Because of a truck driver's living and work situation, good sleep can be difficult. A NCBI study reports that 20 to 28.6% of truck drivers have an unspecified sleep disorder, and 27.5% of truck drivers are diagnosed with insomnia. Sleep is extremely important for your mental and physical health. If you're experiencing problems sleeping while trucking, consider seeking professional help. Loneliness. Truck drivers spend many days and weeks isolated in their truck. According to Business Insider, nearly a third of drivers say being alone is a significant issue affecting their mental health. This blog on TNCRadio.LIVE has been brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Enjoy the best in trucker-style music and comedy weeknights, starting at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook-Cohen from Zonta International about human trafficking. Laura, before we went to break, and I'm sorry I had to interrupt you there, but we had to go to break. You said you had some tips for drivers you wanted to share on the topic of human trafficking?
Yes, and thank you. And no worries about the interruption. I understand completely. Specifically, truckers will want to be looking for vehicles that seem out of place, like RVs, vans in the truck parking section of a parking lot or at a truck stop. Traffickers will bring their victims to the clientele, and Sheila touched on that as well. They will be offering services and much from the direction of their trafficker and or pimp. People that are unable to speak for themselves, the sign for how to identify this is a little more obvious. If you're talking to someone who seems unable to speak for themselves, they could be a victim. Often the trafficker speaks for the victim. They may not be able to answer simple questions like, does your family know where you are? Or do you know where you are right now? Often victims of trafficking don't necessarily know where they are taken to. CB chatter. Be aware of on your CB about commercial company, the words commercial company or buyer location. That will translate, that means they're talking about trafficking. And this could be someone tipping people on where to go find, essentially other people to buy. Violence, any sign of violence, Sheila touched on that one as well, can indicate trafficking. They can even be beaten in public at a truck stop. So there may be those of you out in the audience that may have even witnessed it and maybe wasn't sure what that was. Maybe it was just a domestic violence, but normally that would be a sign of someone being trafficked. Tattoos or branding. Traffickers or pimps will tattoo or brand their victims. They will use a barcode, which I find ironic because it's like scanning an item. I had spoken before about inventory items. And the money symbol, you might find that brand on them as well. And obvious cries for help. You may come across a victim that is trying to escape, and you are encouraged to call the hotline, and we should all memorize this phone number, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-7888. So those are a few more for specifically truckers to be aware. And of course, Truckers Against Trafficking, or TAT. Interestingly, TAT also has, many states have adopted their program, and a lot of drivers, in order to get their driver certification, have to take the TAT training. And that's on how to identify human trafficking and how to work with law enforcement. And so I find that very interesting. It's not in all states, but I think it's around 40 states. And also in 50 states, we should all know that in 50 states, there are laws against human trafficking. 50 states plus District of Columbia. They have a law criminalizing sex trafficking, although the punishment is 5 years or less and a fine. That might be something that people out in the public and locally can work with their state and even federal governments to work on maybe strengthening that and making a more appropriate sentence. So just a few more things to add to the list. Sheila,
if you wouldn't mind, you had given out the number for the hotline, and the last number that you said kind of cut out a little bit on your microphone. Could you repeat that number for people that they can call if they're seeing a situation?
Absolutely. It is 1-888-373-7888.
Laura, if I can add to that, Shelley.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you can text as well. So it's just 6 digits, much easier to remember. But to text right into the DHS, it's 233-733.
233-733. That's just
right.
the text. Okay. And people can report something they're seeing. How does that work exactly?
Yes, they report, and they should report as soon as possible with the location and how long it's been since they left, so that the PD can get some sense about what do I need to send out there in terms of people and number of cars. But absolutely.
Okay.
The traffickers are really sleazy people. I'm sure, if you've seen them, you can see that. But the girls, while they're not all dressed up as we understand most prostitutes, they are dressed in a very sexy way. Okay. And so it's very easy for the guys to just say, well, okay. But I'd like to point out something, and Laura's been touching on it already. I have some suggestions for the truckers as well. Do not drive off with a child in your cab, even though you may be going to the PD or to another stop. You're now kidnapping a child. Don't do it. Do not let the child in. However, now you've got a different issue, and that is the handler is watching her. So if she gets in your truck, he's expecting to get his $100 bill or $50 bill. And if not, she will receive severe abuse. So it's please do not let them in your truck. If you see something, say something. I'm sure you've heard that jargon before. It's the numbers that we just gave you for DHS. And it's to get numbers, those kids need to write down the numbers somewhere on their arm or in their clothes or in their shoe so that they know what to go after as well. Another organization, I just want to come back to some of what California is doing, and not because Laura and I are natives, but because it's the first one I've seen of its kind. It's called the HEAT program, which is Human Exploitation, and Trafficking. And it was put together about 8 years ago by the district attorney just in San Francisco, Mateo County. And what they did is they created a set of rules that they were to follow when finding, identifying, and arresting various traffickers, and even, of course, the children. They have been very successful in California with what they're doing. They use a team of 4 people. One is the DA, one is the PD, one is an inspector of the rights, and that's a really important factor, is the rights have to be adhered to of anyone that's been arrested, and then an advocate. And the advocate, as you can hear where Laura and I are talking, that's what we do. We're advocates. We can't go out and arrest, but we can help push the issue forward. So I did want to bring that out as well. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can keep talking for a long time, so I don't want to do that.
I guess, Laura, you said you had some more tips. And then, of course, I had a question to really give people perspective. How much has this grown in the past 10 years? Because it really wasn't talked about a decade ago that I remember anyhow.
You're correct, actually. What's interesting, it's grown exponentially. And in particular, truck stops years ago were just on the cusp of being watched, and they saw the clicking up and up and up with trafficking happening at truck stops. And so truckers play such an important role in working to find these the traffickers and to save these victims from their abuse. But it's become kind of the hub, if you will, because it's dark. There's trucks moving all the time. There's a lot of activity. And so victims might not be noticed. And a trucker who stopped to get a bite to eat or to rest a little bit may not even notice unless they are aware that truck stops have become the hub of human trafficking. I mean, there's local human trafficking issues. It can be in your neighborhood. The Super Bowl is one of the largest human trafficking events in the world.
Wow.
And crime has increased 40% during the pandemic, during the Super Bowl. And it's money. It comes down to economics. They make money. And when people either buy victims or they buy their services, they are feeding the money machine that the traffickers and pimps are making. And they make the money alone, despite promises of that they can repay their debt, despite being told that they were going to have wonderful jobs, beautiful gifts, traveling the world. And then they find out that that wasn't true at all, and they are human slaves. So it's it's all over, but definitely in the truck stops, I would say that is the most
the biggest area.
Yes, the hotbed of where trafficking has become.
Wow.
Right. If I can add on, I'm sorry, Shelley, go ahead.
We have to go to break here. I definitely want to get into some more details here because people really need to see and hear how grave this situation is and why we all need to do something about it. We're talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook Cohen from Zonta International about human trafficking. This is the TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more coming up. Being on the road can make you feel free, excited, and adventurous. It can also make you feel lonely and even depressed. So it's important for truckers, especially long-haul truck drivers, to bring items on the road to keep them entertained. Truckers have 10 hours off for a 24-hour day. Depending on how long the driver sleeps, there can be several hours where the trucker has nothing to do. We've broken down the list of essential items to keep in your truck in several different categories. The second category we talk about is entertainment. Laptop or tablet. Bring a laptop or tablet and stream your favorite movies or TV shows. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi or a personal hotspot, you can still bring your laptop, some DVDs, and watch a movie. Game console. Playing games is a great way to keep yourself entertained. You can also play with your friends. Bring your Xbox or PlayStation and set up your own gaming station in the cab of your truck. Puzzles, crosswords, or cards. If gaming or watching movies don't interest you, bring some puzzles or crosswords to solve. You can also get a deck of cards and play games like Solitaire, March Same Rank, Devil's Grip, Klondike. Books. Reading books is a great way to pass time and improve brain connectivity. Some popular trucker books include The Highway by C.J. Box, Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon, Paradise Valley by C.J. Box, Rough Way to the Highway by Kelly Mac McCoy. Exercise equipment. Truck drivers' health suffers from the lack of exercise. Bringing exercise equipment on the road will keep you entertained and improve your overall well-being. There's several portable exercise equipment items you can store in the cab of your truck. They include dumbbells, resistance bands, kettlebells, and running shoes.
Want to advertise on TNCRadio.LIVE? Take advantage of great discounts for 2021. Check out the sponsors page at TNCRadio.LIVE or send email to info@TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook Cohen from Zonta International about the terrible problem with human trafficking. Laura and Sheila, you were giving us some really astounding statistics about where traffic is going on, how big the problem really is, how much it's grown. Could you share some more of that information so people really can get an idea of how serious this problem is, and it really is in their backyard?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Shelley, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying, it's not in my backyard. And we all tend to look the other way and think, there's no way there's trafficking in my neighborhood or in my community. Now, we live in Southern California and we live in Orange County, and it is a very large and very wealthy county. And there is trafficking going on every day. And knowing some of those signs, because truckers, they're not always driving, they're home, they're in their neighborhood or with their neighbors. So it's good to understand around them when they aren't on the road and at a truck stop. There are places, I wanted to share with you, our Zonta Club of Newport Harbor, we created a laminated card several years ago. And the story behind the laminated card was if it dropped into the gutter, for instance, in a rainstorm, that card with the national 24/7 support team to 1-888-373-7888 might find itself in the hands of someone being trafficked, and that they could call and be able to speak to someone and be rescued. And this card we did in Spanish, Vietnamese, and in English. And it is relative to our area. In other areas, if they were to do something similar, you would want to, the languages that might be important in your particular county or community. And so this card too, we all have taken these cards, including my husband. I have to give a shout out to my husband, Terry, because he carries these cards in his wallet and he's very well informed about human trafficking. And so when we are either in a nail salon, we are aware that is a place where you might see trafficking happening. And how you see it is you might have a really favorite gal that does your nails and suddenly she'll disappear and you'll have a new one. And you might observe a fast turnover. They are trafficked through nail salons. Massage parlors, they're trafficked through there as well. Hotels, traveling, any hotel. A lot of times there are maids that clean the room. There are workers in the kitchen. There are janitors. There's landscaping. They are being trafficked. And this card is meant to just place in a place, not making any kind of noise about it, but just quietly letting someone know that might be facing it or they know of someone, and they can be saved by calling the number on that laminated card.
Some of those cards, we've also gone from DHS where the child can slip it inside their shoe, so it can't be seen, and but then they have it available if they need it. With the conversation that Laura was bringing up about Orange County is a wealthy county, and she's absolutely right. Yes, we have our differences of ethnicity, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of crime in Orange County. I got to knock wood for that. But here recently, just in the last, I think it was less than 2 months, 2 of our major hotels in Irvine were shut down. And part of the reason was the trafficking that was going on, and I'm sure prostitution as well. These are big hotels that are right around the airport. So I'm happy to see that occurred, and sad to see that it had to occur, if that makes any sense. The issues of child marriage play a big part in this, and it is a very large portion of what Zonta does. And also the military women is another one, is the new project that I am starting on and researching to find out just what is occurring with military women. As I'm sure you've heard, they have been attacked and assaulted and harassed. And I wonder, does this fit into it? Just like child marriage kind of slips into it. Just some things that we believe that your audience, the truckers, need to watch out for. You see it every day. You see opportunities every day. Just report. It doesn't matter. You don't have to even give your name. Just report it to one of those numbers. So,
if a driver sees a young woman or child, in many of these cases in the truck stop, being abused by their trafficker, is it not advisable to get involved with that? Call the police? Well, what's the best way to handle something like that?
They can do two things. Truckers can call 911, and that would be the most immediate resolution to that, because they will send someone out. Number two, again, is calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That number, just for our audience, is staffed 24/7 with trained operators, and they relay this information to your local law enforcement, but they also look for trends because they're monitoring all of this, and they turn it over to the FBI. So those two, I think 911 in the case that you're talking about, Shelley, is immediate right in front of them.
Right.
Get the police out there immediately.
Interesting, if I can add on to what Laura
go
said.
ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, is I had mentioned at the outset that my son-in-law is a truck driver, long-distance truck driver, and he would probably jump out of his cab, grab the kid, and say, "Get in here," and bop the guy on the head that's trying to do that.
Sure.
And they really shouldn't. As important and as to them to do that and to at least save the young lady, young boy too, is not safe for him as well.
I think that's a great point, Sheila, actually, because it's our human instinct to protect, and I'm sure I totally can see a trucker wanting to save that child or young woman or whatever the circumstances are. But you had made the point earlier, if they put them in their truck and they leave and they cross state lines, that is kidnapping and trafficking. So any activity that has to do with illegal sexual trade, and you go across state lines, that is trafficking.
Right.
And that puts them in jeopardy. And that's where the laws have such gray areas. That's frustrating because you're trying to get the person out of the situation.
Right, Shelley, you're absolutely right on that. And yeah, we've been talking about girls because primarily it's girls, young women who are affected, but boys are becoming more and more affected by this, particularly those who are coming across the border as an immigrant. Mm-hmm. And so while maybe it's sex perversion, otherwise it's also labor. We've had several issues in Los Angeles where some of the buildings in which child labor is used has been burned down, and don't know who's in there, where they came from, etc. But boys also need to be watched out for, not just the girls.
And I find it interesting. Isn't the media kind of silent about this? Because there's so many issues. Because in many cases, some of these kids are coming over with what they call coyotes. And if they don't have the money to pay, then they're being shoved into trafficking and everything, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And a lot of times they are told, they are promised, again, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, which never happens, ever. Mm-hmm. And then they're told, well, you're going to just work off your debt if they don't have the money. That's fine. We'll take you, but you'll work your debt. And, we've got a really great job for you waiting. And again, we know what they find in that job, quote unquote. they are then put into trafficking.
And I don't think that story is being told along the border states and what's actually happening. There needs to be more awareness on that, too.
You're probably right, but I know we hear it here. You read the papers, we know it's occurring. Numbers, no. Sometimes it's very, very hard to get numbers. How many people are being tracked? How many people have been brought into that life, and how many people have been arrested, and how many people have been saved. Those numbers, which is what is meaningful to us as a taxpayer, by the way, is not there. It's just not as available. We do a lot of guessing.
Yes, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
I would like to see legislation get tougher. It's great that, that does give a little bit of comfort that all 50 states and district of
many different ways, and it takes them decades if they ever recover from these sort of situations. We're talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook Cohen from Zonta International about the terrible, terrible practice of human trafficking that's growing in the United States. Please stay tuned. This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We've got more information coming up.
The info blog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. A truck driver's guide to balancing work and home life. Truck driving's hard and demanding work. Becoming a truck driver means spending many hours and days on the road. You'll sacrifice a lot for your trucking career. For many long-haul truck drivers, it's hard to separate life at work from life at home. Learning how to have a balance between home life and work life is essential if you want to have a long-lasting career in trucking. Check out our guide to balancing work and home life for truck drivers. Get enough sleep. Getting the recommended amount of sleep each night is a rare thing for truckers. Although sleep may be difficult for truckers because of the uncomfortable way of living, it's essential to their well-being and safety. Start prioritizing sleep and make a sleep schedule. Set an alarm for a certain time and turn off all electronics and get your much-needed sleep. Not enough sleep can make life on the road miserable. Exercise often. Due to the many hours of sitting each day, truckers start to experience body pain and health issues. Not exercising and taking care of your health can cause a lot of problems in the long run. You could be out of a job and possibly out of work. Eat healthy. Having your truck stocked with healthy snacks and meals while you're on the road will help teach you how to have a healthy work-life balance. Start making it a habit to go to the grocery store before you head out on the road. Also, avoid eating at fast food restaurants and truck stops. Do not think about work when you're at home. Whether you love trucking or hate it, you've probably thought about your job while you're off the clock. It can be difficult to separate the two. Thinking about work too much while you're at home can make you anxious, sleep-deprived, and put you in a bad mood. Instead of worrying about work, try picking up a new hobby or exercising. Spending time with friends and family can also get your mind off things. Make time for family. It doesn't matter if you're on the road or at home. Make time for family. Make it a priority to talk to someone in your family once a day. It can be tough for truckers, especially OTR truckers, to maintain relationships with their family due to the trucking lifestyle. Keeping in contact with your loved ones will help life on the road be less lonely. For more information, be sure to check out the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
To report possible human trafficking or to ask for help, call 888-3737-888.
Để báo cáo có thể có nạn buôn người hoặc yêu cầu giúp đỡ, hãy gọi 888 3737 888.
Para reportar una posible trata de personas o para pedir ayuda, llame al 888-3737-888.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook Cohen from Zonta International about human trafficking. We just shared a message, actually, on the air of a phone number that people could call to report human trafficking. It was in different languages, so everyone can use that number. We're trying to get the awareness out. Laura, you said you had some really important information on COVID as it relates to human trafficking?
Absolutely. The UN Office on Drugs and Crime just released a report this month, actually, stating that the impact of COVID on human trafficking is quite serious. There are 3 areas. They consider it, they've gone online. And so what they're calling online prey. And that traffickers, because they're quite clever, took advantage of the global crisis, capitalizing on people's loss of income, increased amount of time both adults and children are spending online. And so this has increased, the pandemic has increased vulnerabilities to trafficking in persons while making it even harder to detect, because they can spin up a website and then take it down, just like people use burner phones for drug trafficking and that type of thing. Online is even more hard to track. Job loss, they're taking advantage of desperate people, just like we've talked about individuals that are brought across the border through coyotes. They take advantage of desperate people trying to find a better life and to make money. No escape. So victims that could have had at least a chance to escape their traffickers during the pandemic, that has not happened. Just like domestic violence during the pandemic, you might notice that there's been TV commercials with a hotline for domestic violence and to be able to call. And that they have put that out there to let those that are stuck at home due to the pandemic, that if they can get to a phone, that perhaps they can be rescued. And crime thrives. So they have, as I said, they're quite tricky and quite smart. So they have crime thrives in times of crisis, and traffickers adapted quickly to what we call the new normal. They responded to closure of bars, clubs, massage parlors, where exploitation can occur by simply moving illegal business to private properties or online. So in some countries, officers from specialized anti-trafficking units were reassigned from regular duties to control national efforts to curb the spread of COVID, providing traffickers with an opportunity to operate with less risk of being detected. So I hope that while we have all been dealing with the pandemic and COVID, that we have law enforcement have been working on it and doing their very best to stop them in their tracks.
Well, this is where awareness, like you're trying to do, it's so very important. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about Zonta International. What does your organization do? How can people get involved?
Well, you just opened the door. Obviously, Laura and I are very fond of Zonta. She's been a member for a lot longer than me. I've only been there 3 years. But we have chapters all over the country, and I think I had mentioned at the outset, all over the world. But just here in the U.S., I would say, well, I know that in California, there's 24 chapters. Nevada only has 2. So it depends on, the population itself. But just get online and put in Zonta and then start looking for location near you, and you'll find out how and where to meet. And our members are always willing, always able, always capable of coming out and saying, hey, come on in, join us on a meeting, come have some coffee with us, hear what we do. And what we do is try and get the organizations who do hands-on work with the individuals, such as the traffickers. We should get our hands on them anyway, but such as the victims, and help them understand the oppression that's going on and what they can do. Different programs require different amounts of reaction from Zonta. So, for instance, I'm not sure if I had mentioned legislative. I think we're all aware of the legislative process that goes on, and so the way in which to make sure that you get some response and that maybe a bill passes is to continually write to your legislator.
Right.
And then the UN is another one. I spent 2 weeks with the UNICEF, where we met with every one of the, not everyone, but 12 legislators. and we talk through what is UNICEF, what is it we do, et cetera, to try and get them to agree to bills. We also do that in Zonta, in which we encourage all of our members to start writing letters or go online and fill in their websites with, this is the problem, this is what we see in our city, and we need your help with it. So that's a very large possibility of success when you can continue to bombard, frankly, the legislators and maybe get some change.
Maybe just as a suggestion here, bombard the media too, so they start covering this the way they should, because I don't think that it's out there as a nationwide message. It may be more prevalent where, on the border states and so forth, but I don't think it's out there the way it should be. I
would agree with you, Shelley, and I think especially with Zonta International, it's as Sheila was sharing, we were formed in 1919. Our mission is to empower women through service and advocacy, and we are in 61 countries, all continents. We have presence there. We have 28,000 members, and we're all volunteers. We have a fabulous staff in Chicago, which is where our headquarters are. But all of us, all 28,000, we are volunteers. And so we do this because of our love for Zonta. And by the way, Zonta, Z-O-N-T-A, is a Sioux word, and it means trustworthy and honest. And that is how Zontians, what we're called Zontians, we are to carry out our service and advocacy in a trusting and honorable way.
Right.
Well, I think what you're doing and getting the word out here and all of your advocacy is absolutely needed. It's marvelous. And I want to thank you for your efforts in this, because these are issues that people need to know what to do. They need to be aware of it. And that's the only way it can stop. And it takes a village sometimes to make these things happen. Where can people reach out to Zonta? We have a little under 2 minutes, so I want you to be able to let everybody know where they can reach out.
So if they go online and they just put in zonta.org, and that's all they have to put in. But they can put in Zonta USA, and that will open up the entire site. And from there, they can then identify, are you in Illinois, or in Florida, et cetera. And then from there, they can participate wherever they would like. And it also shows, sorry, I should have probably sent this to you like last week so you could see the sheer volume of subjects that we deal with. But yeah, that's it. ZontaUSA.org.
Wonderful.
We have 1,200 clubs, Shelley, so, and that's all over the world. And what's fun is each club takes on the projects that they want to take on. Yeah, and besides service and advocacy, we also have education programs internationally, but they start from the ground up from the local club. And I do want to give a shout out to our Zonta Club of Newport Harbor. I've been a member for over 22 years. And
wonderful. We have to go to the top of the hour, Laura. I'm sorry. We've been talking with Laura Peters and Sheila Cook-Cohen from Zonta International. Definitely reach out to them. What they are doing is absolutely tremendous, and you can get involved locally. This is TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. For more information regarding our podcast, reuse, copyrights, etc., please visit our website, www.tncradio.live.